I still remember the moment I stepped onto that plane, feeling a rush of excitement. It was supposed to be just another flight, a quick trip to visit my family. I smiled at the flight attendants, settled into my seat, and looked forward to a peaceful journey. But almost immediately, something felt off. The air felt heavy, tense, like a storm waiting to break. When the flight attendant approached, I thought it was just a normal check-in, maybe asking if I wanted a drink. But then, her eyes locked on me with something cold, almost unreadable. "I'm not serving you," she said, flat and sharp. No explanation, just those words, like a door slammed shut right in my face. I blinked. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice barely steady. She didn't budge, the cabin seemed to freeze. I could feel every pair of eyes, some curious, some judging, some maybe afraid to say anything. A flood of emotions crashed through me all at once: hurt, confusion, disbelief. How could someone treat me like this? On a plane, in public, with dozens of witnesses. My heart pounded, my cheeks burned, and yet, I was left speechless. It was more than just being refused a drink. It felt like I was being erased, judged for something beyond my control. I wanted to disappear, but I couldn't. And then, just as I gathered my courage to speak up, something happened, something no one on that plane expected. When the flight attendant first said, "I'm not serving you," I thought maybe I had misunderstood, so I smiled politely, and asked, "Could I please have a water?" I tried to keep my voice calm, hoping this was just a mistake. But she didn't even blink. "No," she said bluntly. Her eyes didn't soften, her expression stayed cold and hard. It was as if she had made up her mind before I even asked. "I'm not serving you." The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the refusal, it was the way she said it, like I was invisible, or worse, unwanted. The other passengers were watching now. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others whispered to each other, and a few stared in disbelief. I caught the eyes of a woman a few rows ahead. She looked at me with sympathy, but said nothing. I tried again, hoping for a different response. "Is there a problem? I'd just like some water, please." She folded her arms and looked down her nose at me. "I don't have to explain myself." I felt my chest tighten. A knot of frustration and sadness twisted inside me. Why was this happening? Was it because of how I looked? Because of my skin? My mind raced, trying to find a reason that made sense, but there was none. I glanced around the cabin. Some passengers were watching silently, unsure what to do. Others avoided eye contact, maybe afraid to get involved. I felt isolated, like I was standing alone in the middle of a crowded room, invisible and unfairly judged. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred: anger. Not the loud, explosive kind, but a steady fire of refusal to be dismissed. I wanted to speak up, but I also wanted to stay calm and dignified. "I'm not causing trouble," I said softly, trying once more. "I'm just asking for the same service everyone else is getting." The flight attendant's face twisted into a sneer. "You're not welcome here." The words stabbed at me like knives. My throat tightened, and I had to swallow hard to stop the tears that threatened to fall. This wasn't just about a drink anymore. It was about respect. About my right to be treated like any other passenger. My heart pounded, as the flight attendant turned and walked away, ignoring my presence completely. But before she disappeared down the aisle, she glanced back with a smirk. I sat there stunned for a moment, trying to gather myself. But I knew I couldn't stay silent. I could feel the weight of the stares from other passengers, some sympathetic, others indifferent. I pulled out my phone, and sent a quick message to the flight crew supervisor, explaining what had just happened. I could see other passengers watching, some nodding quietly in support. The tension in the cabin grew thicker, almost electric. I could feel eyes on me, some filled with sympathy, some with disbelief that this was still happening in 2025. Inside, I was shaking, not from fear, but from the flood of emotions: vulnerability, hurt, and a deep, fierce determination. This wasn't just my fight, it was a moment for everyone who had ever been dismissed, ignored, or made to feel less because of who they are. As the minutes passed, the flight attendant's hostility only grew. She avoided me completely, refusing to bring any service to my row, but at the same time, she threw sharp looks in my direction whenever she thought no one was watching. I could no longer pretend this was a simple misunderstanding or bad day. It was clear this was discrimination, plain and ugly. I sat upright and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let this slide. Not today. I made up my mind right then. I would not be silent. I would make sure anyone, knew what was happening. Because if I didn't speak up, who would? And so I reached out again, ready to take action, because sometimes standing up is the only way forward. By now, the atmosphere in the cabin had shifted completely. What started as quiet tension was now buzzing with whispered conversations and sideways glances. I could feel the weight of every stare, some full of sympathy, others laced with curiosity, and a few with discomfort, as if the passengers didn't know how to react. I knew I had to act fast. My phone was in my hand, trembling slightly, but I managed to type out a quick message to the flight crew supervisor. I kept my voice low, careful not to draw too much attention. Flight attendant refusing to serve me. This is discrimination, please help. A few minutes later, the supervisor appeared. He looked serious, nodding as I explained what happened. His eyes scanned the flight attendant, who suddenly looked smaller, less confident. But then, something unexpected happened. Someone whispered it to the passengers, an announcement over the intercom. The airline CEO was actually on this flight. He had boarded earlier, traveling incognito. The news spread quickly. The CEO was known for being hands-on and strict about customer service, especially about fairness and respect. Suddenly the whole cabin held its breath. I could see the flight attendant's face drain of color. The smugness was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch. She glanced around, clearly panicked now. Minutes later, the CEO stepped out from his seat in first class and slowly made his way down the aisle toward us. His presence was calm but commanding, and everyone's eyes followed him. Whispering grew quieter. I felt my heart race. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Would he take my side? Would he believe me? Or would this just become another humiliating story to swallow and forget? The flight attendant avoided his gaze, but the CEO's eyes locked onto her without wavering. She fidgeted, trying to come up with an excuse, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. Passengers were silent now, hanging on every moment. You could almost hear a pin drop. The CEO paused in front of us, and the entire plane seemed to hold its breath. He didn't rush or yell. Instead, he spoke with a steady, firm voice that filled the cabin. Everyone waited, wondering what he would say. And then, with quiet authority, he took control of the situation, ready to make things right. The CEO's voice was calm, clear, and filled with authority, as he addressed the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a moment to speak directly to you all. The murmurs faded. Everyone leaned in, curiosity and hope mixing in the air. I could feel every eye on me, the weight of their attention almost overwhelming. He turned to me first, nodding kindly. I understand there was an incident involving one of our flight attendants and this passenger. He looked at me with genuine empathy, making me feel seen and heard in a way I hadn't in hours. Would you mind sharing your side of the story? I took a deep breath and recounted everything. The cold refusal of service, the harsh words, the humiliation I felt. I spoke slowly, trying to keep my emotions steady, but the rawness in my voice was unmistakable. The CEO listened carefully, his expression serious but compassionate. When I finished, he turned his gaze to the flight attendant, who now stood frozen, face pale, and eyes darting nervously. In front of these passengers, the CEO began, his tone firm but measured. You denied service to a customer based solely on who she is. That is unacceptable. The flight attendant stammered, trying to explain herself. I was just following my instincts. She seemed difficult. I didn't mean to cause any harm. The CEO's eyes didn't soften. Instincts. This is a professional environment. Discrimination in any form has no place here. Her excuses fell flat in the charged silence of the cabin. Passengers exchanged looks, some incredulous, others quietly relieved that justice was being spoken aloud. Without hesitation, the CEO announced, effective immediately, "You are terminated from your position." The words echoed through the cabin, and for a moment no one moved. Then, a few passengers began to clap softly, a ripple of quiet applause spreading. Some wiped tears from their eyes. I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me, relief that someone powerful had stood up for me, validation that I wasn't imagining the injustice. But there was also sorrow, a deep ache that it had come to this at all. I glanced around the cabin, seeing faces filled with support and hope. Yet beneath it all was a silent question: why did this still happen? Why was discrimination still alive in places meant to serve us all? The CEO looked back at me, his voice gentle now. "Thank you for your courage in speaking up. We will be reviewing our policies and training to ensure this never happens again." The flight attendant was quietly escorted away, her defeat clear. The cabin's atmosphere lightened, but the memory of what happened lingered like a shadow. I knew this wasn't just my story, it was a reminder that even today, people face cruelty and unfairness because of who they are. But it was also proof that standing up matters, that change can begin in the smallest moments. As the plane continued on its path, I felt a cautious hope. Maybe this was a step forward. Maybe this story would help others find their voices too, because sometimes, it takes one person refusing to be silent to make the world listen. The moment the flight attendant was escorted away, the tension in the cabin finally began to lift. The heavy silence that had wrapped around us like a thick blanket started to unravel. Passengers shifted in their seats, some exchanging relieved glances, others offering small smiles of encouragement my way. It felt like the entire plane was breathing again, breathing out the hurt, the shock, the unfairness of what had just happened. But inside me, the storm was far from over. My heart still pounded with adrenaline, and my mind replayed every word, every glance, every moment of humiliation. Yet beneath that turmoil, was something stronger, a quiet strength that surprised me. I realized then how powerful it is to speak up, to refuse to accept injustice silently. For so long, I had thought that enduring was the only way, that staying quiet was safer. But that day, I learned that silence only allows cruelty to continue. It takes courage to stand up, even when your voice shakes, and sometimes, that courage can change everything. As the flight resumed, several passengers approached me quietly, their eyes warm with kindness. A woman from a few rows behind offered a soft smile and said, "Thank you for speaking out. I'm sorry you had to go through that." Another passenger, a man who had been watching closely, nodded and said, "You did the right thing. No one should ever be treated like that." Their words comforted me, but I also knew the fight wasn't over. The incident had left a scar, a reminder of the everyday discrimination many still face. It was a wound, yes, but also a call to action. Later, I received a message from the airline's customer relations team. They apologized sincerely for the incident, and assured me that they were launching a full review of their training and policies to prevent anything like this from happening again. They promised to hold their staff accountable, and to promote a culture of respect and inclusion. While these words were a step forward, I understood that true change requires more than promises. It needs constant vigilance, and the willingness of every individual to stand against injustice whenever it appears. That flight taught me something important: injustice doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers quietly in moments like these, until someone chooses to listen and speak out. For those watching this story today, remember this: your voice matters. Your refusal to accept unfairness can inspire change, even when it feels small or lonely. We all have a role in building a world where kindness and respect aren't optional, but the standard. Discrimination still exists, and it hurts. But together, by standing up and supporting one another, we can push back against it. We can create spaces where everyone feels seen, valued, and safe. So don't stay silent. Don't let injustice pass unnoticed, because when one of us speaks up, we all grow stronger. Thank you for listening to my story. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's this: kindness and courage matter more than we sometimes realize. Speaking up against unfairness isn't always easy, but it's necessary. It's how we change things, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. If you've ever faced a moment where you felt ignored, dismissed, or treated unfairly, I invite you to share your story or your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice could be the encouragement someone else needs to stand up to. Please take a moment to like this video, if it touched you in any way. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing stories that matter, stories that inspire change and shine a light on truth, and most importantly, share this video with others. The more people who hear stories like this, the stronger our community becomes in standing against injustice. Remember, none of us are alone. Together, we can build a world where respect, kindness and fairness are the rule, not the exception. So let's be brave, let's be compassionate, and let's keep speaking up, because every voice matters. Thank you for being part of this journey.